love to bring in Phyllis Costanza, the head of social impact and CEO of UBS Foundation, into the conversation. Phyllis, given your extensive background in philanthropy and impact investment, we'd love to hear your perspective on investment priorities and how to incentivize returns with outcomes. What are the financial structures that foundations like UBS Optimus think about when they support initiatives in education, health, and livelihoods? And how do women's economic empowerment intersect with those structures?
Thank you for having me. I think what Colin said is spot on, that it's not just about not having enough resources, but it's about the allocation of those resources. And so what we're trying to do is put the impact back in impact investing, basically, and focus on outcome-oriented financing. And some examples of this, for instance, several years ago with Children's Investment Fund Foundation and Educate Girls, we launched the first development impact bond in education. And the goals of that were to, number one, get more girls into school who have been out of school. And the second was to improve learning outcomes by it was 75% better than a control group was the actual number. And so the Educate Girls was laser focused on delivering that impact. And they were incentivized, and we, as the investors in this, were also incentivized if they delivered on those outcomes. And the way that structure worked is we, as the UBS Optimus Foundation and our clients, invested in Educate Girls to deliver on those two outcomes. And if they were achieved, as demonstrated by a randomized control trial, then Children's Investment Fund Foundation would pay us back with a return, and Educate Girls would get a bonus. And in the end, they exceeded their targets by 116% on number of girls in school and 160% on learning outcomes, which was extraordinary. And we need to keep focusing on those types of instruments. Another example is a debt instrument that we provided to an organization called Impact Water in Uganda. And they're providing clean water solutions to low-cost private schools in the country. And we all know that it's not as much about the hardware of the clean water systems, but it's about the software, whereby we need to make sure that the children and their teachers understand the tremendous impact, and we've all learned this very painfully these past year and a half, the tremendous impact of hand washing with clean water and soap, and also drinking clean water instead of the brown water that a lot of people are used to drinking. And so what we did was incentivize not only getting those clean water systems in the school, but making sure that children were using them. And that was measured by increase in attendance. And the hypothesis being that when children are healthier, they miss school less. So as attendance rates go up for this debt, then the interest rate on the loan for Impact Water comes down. But also it incentivizes our investors, because Rockefeller Foundation was interested in the outcomes. And so what they did was pay a bonus to our investors and to Impact Water, so that Impact Water's interest could go as low as 1.9%, and the return to the investors could go as high as 9%, based on the actual outcomes of that investment. So those are just two examples of how you can invest in developing countries in issues that really do substantially impact women and girls.
Thank you, Phyllis. And I think this is exciting because we begin to see, and I know in the audience we have both, philanthropists and investors, but we begin to see really practically how philanthropy can work alongside development finance and private capital to maximize sustainability. And so, in terms of, your specific thoughts on how we can activate that G7 commitment of the US $15 billion to support workforce training for women and support female entrepreneurship, because we're really going to dive down into those issues towards the next session.
Great. Well, it's an economic argument, first of all. We all know women have been hardest hit by this pandemic. They earn less and have less savings. 70% of health workers and first responders are women. And also women represent disproportionately the informal economy and are much more burdened with unpaid care and domestic work. So many of them are in fact forced to drop out of the labor force. And Colin was talking about the economic benefit. And here's the argument really for the G7 is women generate 78 cents of revenue per dollar invested compared to 31 cents from companies founded by all male teams. And so gender regressive scenarios could lower GDP globally by an estimated $1 trillion by 2030. Conversely, taking action now to advance gender equality could add as much as $13 trillion to the global GDP by 2030. And this is the key argument. We can't afford not to do it. So investors, lenders, grant givers, capital allocators play an outsized role in shaping what the future could look like by the products we develop, the services, and the communities that benefit from them. And investing in women entrepreneurs has an exponential impact on individuals and their families and their communities, and finally, as society as a whole. So what we need to do is encourage that we provide women entrepreneurs with education around the types of capital, how to access it, get them investment ready by working with them on their businesses, providing technical support or capacity building, helping founders to present or pitch more effectively when seeking funding, help them expand their networks and more intentionally connect them to capital providers and encourage them to pursue these sources of capital. And we have, as a financial institution, a really strong role to play. And even in the types of investments, we just launched something called the Carmen Fund, which invests in women hedge fund managers. And a portion of that money, of the carry on that fund, is actually going to go to female entrepreneurs, women-led businesses in developing countries. And so there's lots of ways for financial institutions to structure instruments that help women who are the most impoverished and in the most marginalized regions. So those are some examples of the things that we can do.
Thank you, Phyllis. And it's really inspiring to hear you and take such a